when people go through life in the United States today, we think that there is a prescribed path that you should be following. And if you're not going up and up and up, then something must be going wrong.
Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. This is the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we explore ways to build resilience, build confidence, and make our minds work in our favor. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help us intentionally create a rock-solid mindset upon which a vibrant life experience can be built. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, a life design strategist, and co-founder of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. Each week, I'll introduce you to an expert, a concept, a technique, or a hands-on practice that will help you build psychological strength in your own life. These are the tools to help you thrive. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert and I'm your host, and I am thrilled that you joined us this week for the podcast because we have such a wonderful guest. Our guest this week is someone who I have worked directly with, someone who I just have the most respect for as someone who takes her craft and takes her job so seriously, and it absolutely shows in the way that she is making a difference for her clients. Now, before we jump into who we're going to be talking to this week, I want to just mention that this week's episode is being sponsored by the Peak Mind membership. In our membership in Peak Mind, we are helping people build psychological strength day in and day out through things like hands-on workshops that we conduct live online. We've got a 24/7 on-demand library, 30-day challenges, which we'll actually talk about a bit during today's interview and how powerful those exercises can be, and so much more. And right now, we are offering an incredible special. For a very limited time, you can join us in the Peak Mind membership for only $1 for your first month. Holy cow, $1 to try it out and start building psychological strength. That is huge. If you're at all interested, head over to www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Okay, so on to this week's guest. This week you are going to meet Shannon Schottler. She is a certified life and career transitions and leadership coach based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She spent the first 10 years of her career in corporate America, and recently she left that job to honor her deepest values, serving others professionally as their coach. And personally, she became a foster parent and has done a ton of volunteer work around things like social justice issues, around gender, education, and racial equity. Shannon's mission for this chapter of her life and the work she's doing as a coach is to empower more people to find, know, and honor their truth personally and professionally. And she believes now more than ever, our world needs more self-aware leaders who know not only how to lead a mission, a team, or a business, but also how to lead themselves extraordinarily well. That is a huge distinction. She believes that self-aware leaders will change the world, and that starts with each of us. Today, we're going to be diving into so many incredible topics. I want you to think about right now, before we jump in today, because this is really going to help you get the most out of this interview. I want you to think about right now how your life feels. Meaning, what phase of life do you feel like you're in? Are you in a phase of life where you are actively motivated and chasing a goal? Or are you in more of a phase of life where you're just kind of feeling a little stuck and still? Or maybe you're in a phase of life where you're doing a lot of self-reflection and really thinking about who you are and what your next steps should be. Or maybe you kind of know what those are and you're getting ready to take those steps. That's going to be those four phases are going to be a huge part of this interview with Shannon Schottler. She talks about, the work that she has done within her coaching practice, specifically around something she calls the cycle of renewal. And we'll get into that, those 4 phases and what they mean, and how you can make the most of each of them and make sure that you come through them very intentionally focused on what your next steps will be. We also talk in great detail about the importance of mindfulness and self-awareness, and it is not going to be the discussion you expect. We're not going to tell you to go meditate for hours every single day. but we are going to talk about how transformative those two practices can be. And last, we talk about something that she calls the paths to action. And it kind of helps to think about it if you start from the end and work your way backwards. So action, or your behavior, being the last step, which is driven by feelings. And those feelings are driven by the story you're telling yourself, or your beliefs, which is driven by quote unquote facts that you might see. And she gives an amazing way to sort of hack this set of steps or this path in order to generate new behaviors or take new action that might not be something that feels as natural to you right now, but it is something that you want to try. This is such a hands-on, actionable interview, and I'm absolutely thrilled for all of you guys to get to meet Shannon Schottler. I've worked with her in the past. I've gotten to experience firsthand how amazing she is at her job and how much heart she puts into it. And I'm just thrilled that we get to have her here today on the podcast. All right, I'm excited for you guys to meet her. Let's roll that interview. Ms. Shannon, I am so thrilled that you're here today. I feel like we've known each other for eons, and I've been admiring your work from afar, and this is just awesome to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and right back at you.
This is so exciting because folks listening to this, I mentioned, I've been following Shannon for quite a while. We got connected, I think through Instagram the first time, but I've had the opportunity to actually work directly with Shannon with some of the work that she does. And so I explicitly sought her out because she is such an incredible gift to the world. She is so incredibly skilled at what she does that I know this episode is going to be incredibly valuable. So super pumped to dive in. Shannon, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and the work you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Shannon Schottler, and I am a life transitions and leadership coach based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And what that means to me is really helping people move towards their aspirational goals. What is the life and career that they imagine for themselves? And how can we take steps together to support them in getting to where they want to go?
That's amazing. So how did you get into that work? Because there's a lot, we kind of mentioned a little bit before we hopped on to record, there's a lot of coaching out there. There's a lot of people who are in the field, and there's a lot of different paths that you can take to call yourself a coach. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you approached it, because it was very strategic and methodical from what I saw.
Yes, 100%. So I was first introduced to the field of coaching actually when I was still in corporate America. So April, I think we both have the same former employer in common. And in that organization, they were really focused on how to teach leaders of teams to truly operate with a coaching mindset. Coaching and managing are two very different skill sets. So I got an intro to the basics, the true foundational elements of what true coaching is at that organization. And then from there, I went on some career and soul searching journeys, part of my own transition. And I talked to a lot of people to determine what the right certification path was for me. At the end of the day, I chose to get certified with an organization called the Hudson Institute out in Santa Barbara, California, because all of my research showed me that even professors who taught at other institutions said, if you can afford Hudson and can make the commitment to get yourself out to Santa Barbara, you should go there. They're really the leading experts in the field and where the field is heading. So that was after 1.5 years of coaching with just what I had learned at Target that I chose to really double down and become an expert, a master. That is truly my commitment to this craft. And I do believe it's a craft.
I totally agree with you, calling it a craft because in the work that we did together, so just total transparency for folks listening, Shannon has this amazing thing that she does, I don't know, a couple times a year maybe.
Yeah, twice a year.
Yeah, twice a year, called a Values and Vision Intensive. And it's this 2-ish hour session that you go, and she basically rips your life apart and puts it back together again in 2 hours. And you leave and you're like, wow, I need a snack and a nap and a glass of wine or something, because that was crazy. But I never understood what it meant for somebody to say, I'm going to hold space for you And I walked out of that session knowing exactly what that phrase meant, because I felt like you had so masterfully designed that experience. You had so carefully thought through how you would lead me through that experience. And I felt like every moment that we were in that room, you were there for me and to help me achieve whatever it was that I needed to achieve when I walked in that door. So good. You're so good.
Oh, that's so kind of you to say. And truly, I think that's a credit again to the program that I went through, because Hudson is unique in the sense that they really focus on self as coach, which is about really embodying. Sometimes as coaches, or some people who I think call themselves coaches in this profession, we really think about the tools and the resources and the doing and the tactical. But truly, I believe that the greatest gift I can give someone is my presence as a coach. So I'm very intentional about how I create that space and how I pay attention to what Hudson calls the 6 elements of self as coach, to create that space, that sacred container to do the work within.
It was so good. Well, you are extremely successful at it. I've been, again, watching you on Instagram, and something that you've been talking about a lot lately is what I'd love to dive into with this interview in particular. You've been talking a lot about something called the cycle of renewal, and that it was incredible when you initially described what this is and the stages of it, because I could totally see how the ebb and flow of my life had followed this, but I had never had words for it. And so I'd love it if you could just kind of give us the overview of what that is, and we'll kind of dive into the stages as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got really passionate about sharing about it because I feel like when people go through life in the United States today, we think that there is a prescribed path that you should be following. And if you're not going up and up and up, then something must be going wrong. So when I learned about the cycle of renewal through my Hudson certification, it was like the heavens opened up for me. There was another way that I could live my life and view my life to better care for myself throughout the transitions. So high level, the cycle of renewal has 4 components to it, 4 phases, if you will. The first phase is about going for it, right? Like the wind is in full bloom. You have clear goals. You are so focused, know exactly what your days are like, and you are just getting after it. This phase only lasts so long, right? And when I have clients who are in it, we're really focused on how can we just sustain this momentum that you're feeling right now. But eventually, some people move into phase 2, which is called the doldrums. Now, I wasn't familiar with sailing before. April, I don't know if you are familiar with sailing terms.
I took one sailing tutorial class. I got to pull on those ropes for about 20 minutes. So I'm pretty sure that makes me an expert.
Yeah, you know more than me. So I was unfamiliar with this word until I was introduced to it. And the doldrums are essentially when you're trying to sail, but there's no wind. The wind is completely gone. You are feeling frustrated, stuck, dismayed. Maybe you went through a layoff, through a divorce, whatever it might be. And you just feel like you're in a box and you can't get out. Now, when people hit that doldrums phase, it's really about sorting and making some choices, right? And in the spirit of keeping us on the cycle, we'll stick with the next phase of making the choice to say, I'm going to enter the cocoon, phase 3. And that's really about going inward to the hull of your ship, if you will, if we stick with the sailing analogy, and taking stock of what you want to keep, what you're ready to let go of, and beginning to envision and imagine what life could look like in the next chapter. And once you've taken stock and started doing some sorting, then you can move into the phase of really getting ready. And the best way that I can describe this phase is about you've determined what puzzle pieces you want in your life, but this phase is about determining the size, right? How big do you want each piece to be? And playing with the fit to get it just right. And also potentially learning new skills, right? So like for me, going back and getting a coaching certification after making the commitment to exit corporate America, so that you can then move back into go for it. Now, what I didn't talk about on Instagram, but I'll touch on here a little bit too, is that when we are in that doldrums phase, there's a choice to be made. Some people choose to go deep into cocooning and really blow up their life. Like truly, that's what cocooning is starting from scratch. Doesn't mean you have to quit your job, though some people choose to do that. And others may not yet be ready to commit to that level of transition. So sometimes we do what's called the cut across the circle and go from doldrums into go for it again, simply by maybe changing the company of where you're working or changing one smaller aspect about your life. And that's the cycle of renewal in a nutshell.
So it feels, what I love is that you were talking about how people feel like there's a prescribed path. And I have this hypothesis that I'm going to test it out on you and on our audience for this episode. So if you're listening to this and you have thoughts on what I'm about to say, if it resonates or if it doesn't, I want to hear both. So like hit me up on DMs. I want to hear about it. I have this hypothesis that people throughout much of their life, I'm going to stay with this boat analogy. Like, and
Let's
we're going to
do it.
Yay. We're going to go
on the boat.
Get on the boat, people. We're going to go with rudders. I have this hypothesis that much of our life, we have a rudder that is telling us where to go. So when we're young and we're in grade school, we have a rudder because it's saying, okay, you're in first grade, great. Your next goal is second grade, cool. Okay, third grade, okay, great. Fourth grade. So you have sort of a direction that society is telling you you should go. You hit high school, okay, cool. Focus on graduation. Just point toward that. Okay, great. Now you've done that. Great. College. Okay, focus on graduation. Okay, cool. Maybe it's grad school or whatever, but grad school or a job. Okay, great. Job, cool. Get married. Great. Kids, yep, check. House, great. Like there's this prescription of box checking that tends to be the more well-worn path. Now, some of us veer a little bit, but mostly well-worn path. Here's my hypothesis. Once you check all those boxes, you're in your mid-30s, all of a sudden, your rudder falls off. There's nothing telling you what your next goal is. And so many people who reach out to me, and I developed this hypothesis out of just emails that I've gotten. People are like, is this it? Like, what do I do? There's so much life ahead of me. I don't know what to do. And I resonate with that prescribed path because at some point you have to be your own rudder. And I think going through these phases, that can be easier in some cases and a lot harder in others. And times of transition, I think it would be really difficult.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that theory of the rudder. And similarly, if I look back through clients that I work with, a very consistent theme that I hear in an intake form is, I want a clear path forward. In other words, their rudder dropped off and they just aren't sure what happens next because as a society, we've been so trained to follow a path. And so when the path ends, say in your mid-30s, that's a really scary, vulnerable time for individuals. And a big behavioral coaching theme for me often ends up to be a theme around self-trust, right? Because for so many years, and myself included, right, until I hit the 30 mark at Target Corp, someone else had been telling me what to do and where to go and who to be. And so beginning to rebuild a behavior and a habit of self-trust as an adult is work.
Totally agree. Because I don't feel like we're prepared for that early in life. Like no one really talks to you before you get there. Now, once you get there and you're in your mid-30s, you're like around this group of people who are all sort of similarly confused as to what just happened, right? Mm-hmm. Like they've all recently lost their rudder. But we're not prepared for it as we enter that phase. We haven't been thinking about that. We've just been focusing on the next goal. And I think that transition period, it's just tough. It's just tough for people.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, don't want to admit or be honest about it at first. I know that was the circumstance that I was really in because you think you're the only one that's going through it, which is why I am so passionate about getting the word out about this cycle, because there is a different way to live life. And every time I talk about it, people inevitably end up saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much. It is so helpful for me to be able to put a label on how I'm feeling or where I might be, and to have some hope that we're going to come around again, right? It's a season. Do the work and it'll come around again.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could, so thinking about those 4 steps again, I'm wondering if we can kind of step through them a little bit and think about ways that you coach people through each step and sort of the advice you would give people to help them move through that step and thrive as much as they possibly can. Because I can imagine that the difficulty that could arise in, say, a go for it step, there are potential pitfalls there. I can see them. They're different than a cocooning potential pitfall. So I'd love to step through those and just learn a little bit about how you would coach somebody through each of those steps, knowing that we have, limited time together today.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's do it. We can start with go for it. I can think of a client right now. And what's really indicative for me of identifying that somebody's in the go for it phase is pretty much in every session, we are action planning, right? Like she's got the vision. She knows what she's after. A lot of our work together, frankly, is accountability. I don't honestly end up finding a lot of clients who seek coaching when they're in the go for it phase. Typically, it's an organization that might be hiring me to support a leader in just continuing to take away, right? Because they are just on fire and feeling so clear. But where I do offer words of caution to people in the go for it phase is work-life balance, work-life integration, satisfaction. I know there's some feelings on that word of balance because we can tend to be so focused and all consumed with that feeling of energy that we don't care well for ourselves in that phase of life. So that'll be something that I keep an eye on with clients who are in that space of life and is a common theme, I would say, when we build an initial goal plan is some element of like, oh yeah, I need to pay attention to some balance here.
I can totally see that. That's one of my big problems when I get really, and maybe it's common, when I get really excited about a particular goal. My husband jokes that I'm digging the pool. Like, if you need a pool dug, he'll say, give my wife a big open field and a teaspoon and just tell her to get to work. And I'll just sit and dig for like months because I just get really focused on getting that thing done. So I can totally resonate with that.
Yeah, I love that. So that's very common in the go for it phase. Basic blocking and tackling. What are the obstacles of the day? Okay, let's make the goal plan. Okay, how's your work-life balance? And then if we think about somebody who's in the doldrums, I'd say this is a more common client for me to start work with. Ooh, if I'm being really honest with the doldrums, the work is honestly getting people out of victim mindset.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so we can find ourselves trapped in the triangle, right, of victim, persecutor, rescuer. And so oftentimes somebody in the doldrums, again, they're feeling stuck in that box and they're really unable to see the choices and the options that they might have. So a lot of our initial work together is on helping them see choice and helping them get out of the space of this is happening to me and more about, well, what do I want to do from here? I am where I am. What now?
I love to call that radical responsibility. Like it makes people mad when I say it this way, but 100% responsibility for 100% of the situations you find yourself in. Not blame, not fault. Those are different things, totally different concepts. But radical responsibility to me is forward looking. Here you are. What do you want to do? Not what got you here, but here you are. So now we need to talk about what steps you're going to take next. And that choice is up to you. But it is tough to acknowledge that you have a choice.
Yep. And supporting them in letting go. There's a lot of anger in this phase, right? So think about it. These can be people who are going through a divorce. This can be somebody who just got laid off from a job, who just got passed up for a promotion that they thought for sure was going to be theirs. So there's a lot of anger, and it takes some work to work through that anger and let go so that they can move on to a more radically self-responsible space.
I could totally see that. Yeah. What tends to, is it a big life transition like that, like a divorce or a layoff or something like that, that tends to transition people from the go for it stage into the doldrums?
Generally speaking, of course, there's the clients. I'm thinking of a client now who's been at the same company for 18 years, right? And she's just ready for something different.
You're just done. Yeah.
Yeah, she's done. That can certainly happen. It doesn't have to be something big and radical.
Got it. Okay.
Cocooning?
Cocooning. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to take a deep breath before we even get into this one because I can just feel it. Like I've been there. I can feel it. Life can be so much more than simply going to work and waiting for the weekend. But deep down, you already know that. You know that life can be so much more vibrant. You know you were made for more than just passively going through the motions. You know you can thrive, but to do that, you have to start from the inside out. And that is why I'm so excited to announce that for a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us in the Peak Mind membership for only $1 for your first month. That's right, $1 to join us in the full Peak Mind membership. All you have to do to take advantage of this amazing offer is to visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Think about it. We all know what we need to do to keep our bodies strong. But what about our minds? What if you had the tools to build the psychological strength, confidence, and resilience to help you thrive at work, at home, and in the rest of your life? What if you made the commitment to living your life by design and not by default? All of this is possible. The goal of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength, is to help you build the mental toughness, flexibility, and resilience to thrive in your life. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help you intentionally create the vibrant life experience you know is possible. Through live online workshops, a 24/7 on-demand library, expert interviews, and monthly challenges, our members are building the psychological strength that it takes to thrive through life's ups and downs. And like I said, you can do it too. For a limited time, we're offering you the opportunity to join us for only $1 for your first month. Just visit www.peakmindpsychology.com, click on the membership, and enter the code THRIVE at checkout. Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So what choice are you making? Join us in the Peak Mind membership before this amazing offer goes away.
The cocoon. So what's often tough for clients in this space is to give themselves permission to slow down and to really allow themselves the permission to do the work of cocooning. We don't need to do so much doing. We need to do a little bit more being in this phase.
Oh, okay. Say that again. That was like, that like punched me in the stomach.
Yeah. So it's cocooning. We don't need to do a whole lot. We need to be. Particularly in the beginning entry phase, right? Because you just got out of a really toxic, hectic, frustrating situation, right? So it's just learning how to be again is a lot of the work in this space. And that can be tough for a lot of the doers, the achievers, the high performers to just slow it on down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the work in this space often revolves around that, giving yourself permission to go slow. And giving yourself permission to be scared. I remember when I was first in that cocooning phase, the way that I described it to my coach was, I feel like I'm in a fog and I'm being asked to cross a river over these like teeny tiny stepping stones, and I can't even hardly see the very next stone. So giving yourself some time and patience to do that work. The biggest advice that I give to people in this phase is committing to a reflection practice, committing to taking some time to journal. For me, that looked like making a list of coffee shops that I wanted to go to around Minneapolis, St. Paul area, getting a stack of books that I knew would help me on my cocooning journey, and then committing to reading those books and literally not letting myself finish a book without journaling on the questions that it was asking of me.
Oh, wow. And so that practice right there, this is where I think a lot of people might fall short in that they'd read the book, they'd read the question, but not actually put pen to paper, not actually do that part of it. Like, oh, okay, I get it. I've thought about that question. There's magic in actually picking up a journal or a piece of paper and writing down your thoughts.
Yeah. A very common thing that I'll say to clients who are in this phase is that there is no change without self-awareness, and there's no self-awareness without self-reflection.
That's huge. Tell me what self-awareness means to you, because that's a probably misunderstood word as well.
What a great question. I think self-awareness to me, maybe this is too simple. You're going to have to help me out here, April. But to me, it's like taking a moment to be aware of who you are, both in how you choose to respond to other people, but also what's important to you, and having a really strong sense of self. Again, this maybe goes back to the topic earlier that we touched on with self-trust, to begin cultivating that self-trust that you do know who you are and you are capable of moving forward in a direction that will be in alignment with who you want to be in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I recently, I put this on my Instagram. So if anybody follows my Instagram and sees my stories, you probably saw something about this. But I recently auditioned to give a TEDx talk. And the way that I positioned, it's related to what we're talking about with self-awareness. I talked about how I'd read this book recently called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson. Such an awesome book. If you're at all interested in space and that kind of thing, pick up this book. But anyway, he talks about how in our universe, there's 80% of the matter is dark matter. So this is matter that you can't see, you can't touch it, we can't measure it by any normal means. It's very, it's dark matter. You can't, you're just not aware of it. The way that we know that dark matter exists, though, is because we can measure the impact that it has through gravity on other objects in the universe. So it's throwing off gravity, so we know it's there, but we just don't know what it is. Now that's just like blows your mind to begin with. But where I think self-awareness comes in is our minds are a lot like that. And I think our life experience is a lot like that. About 80% of what our mind does during the day is subconscious. It's below our awareness. It's the dark matter of our mind. We don't know, we aren't capable of seeing and understanding and perceiving the content of those thoughts. But what we can see, and this is where self-awareness comes in to me, what we can see is the impact that those subconscious thoughts have on our behavior, our emotions, and our conscious thoughts.
Yeah.
So if you can get really good at watching your own thoughts, not engaging in them, but like just seeing them for what they are, your own emotions and your own behaviors, and that to me takes a ton of reflection. Like, why was my emotional response in that situation not quite what I expected it would be? There's some dark matter there. What is it? And that to me takes some like circular journaling of like the nth degree.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a tough practice for some, right? Who, if we think about people who are in the corporate rat race, like, oof, you are running from meeting to meeting, right? I support some executives right now as a coach who literally don't even have 5 minutes in their day to catch a breath. So that sometimes is the starting place of the work. How do we carve out some time for mindfulness? How do you schedule a 55-minute meeting so you can take 5 minutes on the end if one of your goals is working on emotional intelligence, and just quickly scan and check in. What did I do well? What do I wish I would have done better? To begin to build your self-awareness. Another fun one that I'll do with clients sometimes to just begin to raise our awareness of how unaware we might be is asking questions about how it feels in their body.
Oh, yeah.
And that can really be mind-blowing for people to be like, what? Like, I have no clue what it feels like in my body. But that can be, our body is often much easier to interrupt than our mind. So that can be the first sign to build your awareness around, of just like, what happens in my body when I bite off the head of one of my coworkers? What do I notice? Oh, I lean in. My posture gets pretty aggressive. So that instead you can work on noticing that and then interrupting that pattern first.
And that's where, I mean, we do a ton of this within the Peak Mind membership, where we do, I think where people focus a lot is on our monthly workshops, and those are powerful. I don't want to put those down. They're awesome. But we do these 30-day challenges, and they're meant to be something small each day. This isn't arduous. And sometimes the power of those tiny things gets overlooked, but it's not the tiny thing. It's the tiny thing that you do every stinking day in and day out. Every time you leave a meeting, you just make it a practice to ask yourself those two questions that you said. What could I do better? What did I do well? Like if you build that tiny little practice in, you're training your mind to automatically like assess in those situations. It'll catch on. Your mind is a really smart, powerful asset that you have. It's just not that sophisticated. Like you just keep throwing the same thing at it and it's going to catch on at some point and start doing it for you. But you just have to do those little pieces each day. That's why the 30-day challenges are so powerful for people. I love this. Okay, I'm less afraid of the cocooning period now.
Oh yeah, and it can feel really scary and daunting. But then honestly, it reaches a phase where you're like, ooh, this is comfy. I want to stay in here a little bit longer. But it is time to emerge at some point, which might be a good segue into us for getting ready. And the work at that phase, again, is somebody who's done the work who says, okay, yeah, I know what I want to be next. I know that these are the elements that are most critical in my life. And again, in getting ready, it's about right-sizing the pieces. So maybe you think you want to switch from full-time to part-time work. Okay, it's like beginning to work that down and see how it feels and checking in and having permission to make adjustments along the way as you begin to fit that puzzle just right.
The making adjustments piece. Okay, so I'm just going to keep telling people to follow you on Instagram because your stories are so worthwhile. They're so helpful. Shannon teaches in her Instagram stories every single week. She will go through some type of concept. I think it's on Thursdays or one day of the week. I hardly ever know what day of the week it is the problem. But she'll go through a particular concept and then she also goes through like these experiments that you can run in your life. I think it's like a way to be and a thing to try or something like that.
Yeah, you got it. Try it Tuesdays. Yay. Way to be and a thing to do.
So the experimentation piece, I think, is something that's also very hard for people because so many of us have been taught to, like, we do things when we're going to do them well. Or if we do something and we decide it's not for us, we're quote unquote quitting. Or you get into sunk cost. I've wasted all that time that I put in. I have to keep going, even though I'm miserable and I hate it here. Yeah. It's so hard for people. And is there a way that you work with your clients to help them, I guess, feel more permission to experiment and ultimately decide that something's not right for them?
Oh, I think that permission to experiment is the key right there. I have not encountered a client who's like, no, I can't even give myself permission to experiment. In fact, I was just with a client this morning, and I kind of do this like wiggly, shaky thing with my body whenever it comes up. I'm like, okay, so let's just give ourselves permission to play here. And she said, okay, I love it when you do that. Because that feels approachable to me. If I tell myself I have to commit to doing this thing or living this lifestyle this way for the rest of my life, that's when it gets really daunting.
Yeah.
So it's saying I get to just try this. I get to just try this thing. Example, having 45-minute meetings or 55-minute meetings instead of an hour. And I'm going to tell my team, hey, we're just going to play with it and see how it goes for a week. And then you let me know and I'll let you know and we'll decide what we do from there. Freeing, so incredibly freeing to give ourselves permission to do that.
It's just the language that you put around it. You're not committing to something for life. I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. And then notice if it serves you, right? That goes back to how passionate I am about self-reflection. Actually doing the work in the back end to say, oh, wow, did that serve me? What's the hypothesis that I'm testing for here? I'm testing to see if I can create enough space to do some reflection. Did it work? Did it not work? And really detaching from the outcome, if you will, and just committing to the experiment and then observing what the outcome is and deciding where you want to pivot from there.
Because sometimes we take that outcome to mean, did I do it well or not, or something like it's indicative of our, I don't know, ability to have executed that experiment or something like, but that isn't, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It doesn't have anything to do with you or how well you did something. It's just, we're going to try something different next time.
Yes, 100%.
I love it. I want to change gears just a little bit. You have this other notion that we've recently spoken about called paths to action. I'm wondering if you can step us through that as well, because that was another majorly powerful topic that you and I chatted about recently.
Yeah, let's do it. So, paths to action is something that inevitably comes up with every single client that I work with because it is really important to me that we are doing the inner work in addition to the outer work to get them to these aspirational places that they want to go. So, paths to action is really about separating out four things. One, what are the facts? The things that you can actually see and hear. Then noticing what is the story that I am telling myself about those facts. These are the two things that we often get confused. So I'll really check in with the client to say, okay, can we see and hear that? Nope. So that goes in the story column. Next is the feelings. Noticing how do you feel when you tell yourself the story, such as I'm never going to be a great leader, or I'm never going to be able to figure out what I want to do next with my career. Noticing the feelings. Then when you feel that way, how do you behave? How do you choose to act in those moments? And really separating out those four parts can be helpful for people to find an approachable way into beginning to interrupt their thoughts. So for some people, it's working that arrow backwards and starting with the action. Like, okay, you want to, sometimes I work with entrepreneurs, you want to create consistent content on Instagram. Great. How do you need to feel to do that? And what new stories that are actually believable, I'm not in the business of telling anyone lies, do we need to identify with and more firmly anchor to support you in feeling that way, regardless of what the facts tell us?
Well, and what's interesting, I just recorded something the other day. I haven't released it yet, but it's a video that talks about a cognitive bias that we have. I love this connection between the story and the facts because the story is a belief, right? It's a story you've told yourself to the point where you believe that this is the case about you.
Yes.
We have, all of us, I do, you do, everyone has this cognitive bias called the confirmation bias, which is purely there to make the world more understandable and simplify the information that's coming in because it's too much. So this is another way that, our mind is doing its best to help us out, but sometimes it's not helping us in the way that we wish it would. So it's thinking about the belief that you hold, whatever that story is that you're telling yourself that might not be serving you. And the confirmation bias is our tendency to seek out, just cognitively, we notice and we give more credibility and more validity to information coming in that supports our previously held belief. And it doesn't matter what the belief is. It could be your belief about gun control or any other crazy politically charged topic that's on Facebook that people are yelling about today. The reason why they can point to facts, quote unquote facts, to support their side is because they've filtered information that refutes that belief. Yeah. And we have that same thing about our own beliefs about ourselves. We filter in information that unfortunately upholds beliefs that are more self-limiting, and we filter out information that would tear that belief down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And sometimes in coaching, the assignment might come up to say, how do we look for evidence, right? Like look for evidence that these news stories can also be equally true.
Mm-hmm. Because it's there. We just don't naturally see it. We haven't, there's nothing in our mind that's cueing our brain. This is something I want you to look for in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm like at a loss for where to go. I just feel like I'm like digesting. Okay. This is amazing. I'm just digesting.
Yeah. And there's one more thing that I thought we should say on that. And it's something I haven't talked about on Instagram yet, but I'm really passionate about. I think, maybe this is an Enneagram thing. I tend to work with a lot of high achieving, high performing people who really demand a lot of ourselves. And I find, again, going back to that evidence theory, that we almost believe falsely, in my opinion, that if we ever say something positive to ourselves about ourselves, that somehow we will stop striving for as much. Ooh. And this has become a topic that I've become really passionate about with my clients because, one, I can relate as an Enneagram 3 achiever, all those things. And two, as a new-ish parent, I just think about it. Can you imagine if we parented our kids the way that we talk to ourselves sometimes? Can you imagine if we only told our kids the things that they do wrong? There's this thing in coaching called appreciative inquiry, focusing on what is working and what is going well so that we might build on it. And I think we are telling ourselves lies to think that we're somehow going to not strive as hard if we dare to appreciate what is working.
Wow.
And let the way we parent, for those who are parents out there, be evidence, if you will, that we know this is true, right? When you tell a kid, hey, great job on going potty or whatever it might be, that is very affirming and makes them want to do more of that behavior. So let's look for evidence in that sense that being appreciative of ourselves can be impactful towards creating positive change too.
That's huge. And you can tell that you do a lot within leadership as well, because imagine leading a team where all you're doing is telling them what they're doing wrong, and the chances that that team's going to want to work for you anymore, or are you going to just lose all those employees within the next 6 months because no one wants to work for that person. And you shouldn't want to work for you in that position.
Yes, 100%. There's an excellent book, maybe you've read it, called Thanks for the Feedback. And they simplify feedback down to 3 types: appreciation, evaluation, and coaching. And sometimes I will encourage clients to reflect and turn that around on themselves, right? The way that they think that they need to balance those buckets with their teams is very different from the way that they might talk to themselves. They might stay in evaluation mode with themselves for a really long time and never spend any time on appreciation, or at least getting to a more productive coaching space of asking questions of themselves. So sidebar, but relevant.
Amazingly relevant. So as you think about the work that you do with people and just everything that you learned as you were honing the craft of becoming a coach, which I'm sure you'd say like you're still doing that. And obviously 100%. Like you'll be a lifetime student. I think that goes without saying. But I am curious about how you would define psychological strength from your perspective as someone who is so devoted to the craft of coaching and helping people achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. What does it mean to be psychologically strong?
I love this question. For me, psychological strength means being able to be present enough in this moment to choose my response thoughtfully. It takes a lot of mindfulness, right? To get comfortable enough with being present. That's another thing that I find a lot of my clients want to work on. To then have mindfulness enough to be able to choose a response, have some space between what I'm thinking and how I react.
That's so good. That was so succinctly and beautifully put. I love that. And if you could, thinking about the audience who's listening to this, if you could offer them a couple of just tactical tips, like if you could give homework for this interview and tell people in the next 24 hours, I want you to go do what would be the couple of things you would want them to go do that would help them move the needle from, wherever it is they might be?
Yeah. Love it. First thing, mindfulness. And it doesn't have to look like meditation. It can be choosing to sit in silence on your car ride home instead of turning on music or whatever you might be listening to. Carving out some time for slowness and stillness. So that can then prime the pump to tip 2, I would say, it would be increasing your self-awareness. Commit to a reflection practice. And it doesn't have to be this big daunting thing. It can just be fine. Once a week, check in and ask yourself, what am I doing well that I want to acknowledge myself for? What could I be doing better? It can be that simple to start. And then the last thing, again, because it comes up so much as a positive win for my clients, is examining those paths to action that we talked about earlier. So when you find yourself in self-defeating behaviors, go back through that path to action, facts, story, feeling, behavior, and examine it a little bit and see where you might change up the story, the narrative, to support yourself in taking the actions that you want to take.
That's so good. What I loved about your point about being mindful, it's funny. Our September 30-day challenge in the membership is 30 days of mindfulness, and there's not a single day that we're asking people to meditate. So,
I love
isn't that awesome? Every single morning, our members will get a text message that will give them a tiny, it is easy, mindfulness practice to do that day. And just for folks listening, one of them that we're giving people is in the morning, they'll get a text that just says, I want you to listen to the sound your feet make when you walk today.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Because you have to be aware enough and mindful enough to remember to do it when you're walking, which requires a little bit of discipline, not a lot, but a little bit. And then you'll start to notice small changes in how your feet sound. You'll probably slow your gait a little bit because you'll realize how hurried you always are. There's all these things that come as a result of it, but all we're asking you to do today, this is just one example, listen to the sound your feet make when you walk. That's it.
Yes, I love it. I love it. It can be that simple. For me, one that I'll do a lot on Instagram is hand to heart, 5 deep breaths.
Yes. Yeah. So good. And it's not, I think people think, mindfulness is something that is going to take an hour and they have to have this perfect, beautiful setting and whatever. And it isn't. It can be something that you can do when your kids are there, when other people are there. In a meeting, if somebody else is talking, you can just do a quick body scan or something like, where am I tense? What can I relax? So easy. But people don't realize you can incorporate this in your day-to-day life so easily.
Yes. Yes.
I love this. I could talk to you for so long. It is just so wonderful. It's been so wonderful getting to know you online, and now some of the work we're doing, with the various projects that you're involved in and that I'm involved in. I would love for you to tell people where they can connect with you a little bit more, because if there is a very tiny, tiny number of coaches that I would ever recommend by name, and you are so on that list because you're just so incredibly skilled at what you do. So help people figure out where they can come and find you if they're interested in learning more.
Oh, you're so kind. So first place would be Instagram at Shannon Schottler. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes and all that good stuff.
Yes, we will.
And the second place would just be connecting with me on my website, shannonschottler.com. It can be that simple. I love to engage in DM conversations with people on Instagram. I'm very consistent with my story content to let that be the first source, right, of introducing you to the field of coaching and what it might be like to work or experience me together.
Wonderful. This has been so great. I can't thank you enough for coming on and for sharing so much wisdom with us. Shannon, you are just a light in the world, and it is just so wonderful to have you here sharing all of this awesomeness with us. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Right back at you.
It's a simple fact that nearly everyone in the world could benefit from building psychological strength. But not everyone will put in the time and effort to do so. But today you did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Building Psychological Strength. Now, if you're interested in building the mental toughness, confidence, and resilience you need to thrive through life's ups and downs, visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com. Also, if there's someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And if you yourself found this episode valuable, meaning if you took away even one insight that you can use to build psychological strength in your own life, we would so appreciate it if you would drop us a rating and a review on iTunes. The thing is, the more ratings and reviews we have, the easier it is to get this powerful and important content out to the people who need to hear it. Remember, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So choose wisely, my friend. And I'll see you next time on Building Psychological Strength.